Well, welcome back to Reading the Bible Together, and we're here and we get to have Pastor Joe today.
Yes.
I'm super glad.
And
I don't normally call you
Autumn.
Pastor Joe, but there we go.
no, you don't, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, and
because
I'm back.
If
'cause
you
we've been
did,
out
that
of
would be
town.
strange.
That would be strange. That would be strange. So I'm
But
glad.
it's so much fun to be back with you all, and I really had a great time with Matt a couple weeks ago when we got to be together, and looking forward to doing this again this week.
Yeah, so we're going to get started with Mark chapter 8.
Mark chapter 8. Are you reading?
You're reading.
I'm reading. Okay, here we go. During those days, another large crowd gathered. Since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, "I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me for 3 days, and they have had nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they're going to collapse on the way, because some of them have come from a long distance." His disciple answered, "But where in this remote place can anyone get enough bread to feed them? How many loaves do you have?" Jesus asked. "Well, 7," they replied. He told the crowd to sit down on the ground, and when he had taken the 7 loaves and given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, gave it to his disciples to set before the people, and they did so. They had a few small fish as well. He gave thanks for them and told the disciples to distribute to them. The people ate and were satisfied. Afterwards, the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. There were about 4,000 men that were present that day. And having sent them away, he got into the boat with his disciples, went to the region of Dalmutha. The Pharisees came and began to question Jesus to test him, and they asked him for a sign from heaven. He sighed deeply and he said, "Why does this generation ask for a miraculous sign? I tell you the truth, no sign will be given to it." And then he left them and got back in the boat and crossed to the other side.
The disciples had forgotten to bring bread, except for 1 loaf they had with them in the boat. "Be careful," Jesus warned them. "Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod." They discussed this with one another and said, "It is because we have no bread."
Aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them, "Why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see and ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember, don't miss this, when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up?" 12, they replied. "And when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketful of pieces did you pick up?" They said, 7. And he answered them, "Do you still not understand?"
They came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led them outside the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, "Do you see anything?" And he looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus sent him home, saying, "Don't even go into the village." Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked them, "Who do you say I am?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others, one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Messiah." Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him.
Jesus then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, be rejected by the elders and the chief priests, the teachers of the law, that he must be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But then Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, and he rebuked Peter. "Get behind me, Satan," he said. "You do not have in mind the things of God, but instead the things of men."
Good.
Nope,
And then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. Okay, Joe, what's going on?
Lots of stuff happening in this. So one of the things that, and I'm sure you guys have talked about this before because this is the second reading for Mark, right? But Mark, not one of the 12, but Mark is the one who's given us all of Peter's interactions with Jesus. And so what I love about, and I try to remind myself every time I read through Mark, is I'm reading what Jesus experienced with Peter and Peter's feelings about those moments, right? And so that, especially as you get into that part that we just read, where Peter is making this confession of Jesus, saying that he is the Christ, but he also, Mark includes a little bit of unique content in this familiar story, talking about the fact that Jesus actually kind of rebuked Peter in that moment, because Peter was saying something that, although it made sense to him then, it didn't have in mind what God was really up to. And that's one of those little details that I think is so important, because it's something that you would expect Peter to remember. I mean, if you got rebuked by Jesus, you would remember that, right? And that's what shows up in Mark's record of this event, which I think is really cool. So that's one of the many things.
Because why would you include it if it wasn't real and authentic? Then you really wouldn't include it.
You wouldn't,
because it's a story kind of a mark on Peter.
It doesn't make
It doesn't make him look great.
Doesn't make Peter look great. So that's definitely one of the things I see going on. The other thing, and I made a little comment about this in the beginning, the feeding of 4,000, right? Sometimes people think, well, is this like a contradiction? There's the 5,000 in one gospel, 4,000 in another. But, Peter is helping us to be reminded, again, with Jesus' very specific words, these are two separate events. And it's hard for us to think about Jesus doing this miracle multiple times. The truth is, he probably did a lot of the miracles that we read about multiple times, right? But he evidently fed large groups of people multiple times throughout his ministry, and each time, I would think that I would catch on and be like, okay, I kind of understand this at this point, but if I'm really honest, I do miss things pretty easily, and things can happen, and I don't really necessarily understand it in the moment, and I'm sure that's how the disciples were experiencing that moment.
Yeah, I definitely was thinking about that as far as what I've noted, and I'm using a study Bible, so I got to let it rest on my legs a little, not to break my hand. But in it talked about how this is one of the first really, really obvious signs, along with changing the water into wine, but of him being the Messiah, and they didn't get it. They didn't get it, but it was likened back to the Exodus and the manna, being provided to them, and that, he did it multiple times for them to get it, that he is the Messiah, and they did miss it. So, but I think we all could.
That's right.
And so what does it mean?
What does it mean? What does it mean? So when I think about the what does it mean question, the part of this chapter that stands out to me, it really is Peter's very specific proclamation of Jesus. What does it mean? What does it mean that Jesus really is the Son of Man, that he is who he claims to be? It's the most important question that anyone could ask anyone else, right? Who do you say that Jesus is? Pastor Matt, a couple of weeks ago in church, talked about this is the most important question that anyone could ask of another person. Who do you say Jesus is? That question, the answer to that question, is life-changing and life-defining.
Absolutely. And for me, what does it mean looking back at what is God's character revealed in what we're reading? And you see in verse 2 that Jesus had compassion on the people, and that God is compassionate. He's the God of all compassion and comfort. And so just realizing that that's part of his character, and he's revealing that.
That's right.
So what are you going to do?
What am I going to do? I always love this question. So the ending of this chapter, going into verse 34 through the end of chapter 8, whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me and for the gospel will save it, right? What I'm reminded, what this leads me to do, is to remember that everything that I experience in this life is temporary. The only thing that goes from this life to the next life is my relationship with Jesus, and the gospel, right? That's where I want to be. That's where I want to be putting my hope. That's where I want to be putting my energy. Of course, I want to enjoy life in this world while it's here, but I don't want to let the things that I'm looking forward to or the things I'm afraid of or nervous about, I don't want to let that overshadow the fact that all this stuff is really just temporary. And my hope is in eternity, and my hope is in the gospel of Jesus.
That's beautiful. Okay, and what I'm going to do is some people refer to Jesus as teacher, and as you go through Mark, and some rabbi, and rabbi recognizes his lordship. So I want to make sure it's not my agenda, but it's Jesus's agenda.
Yeah.
So we hope you'll join us again tomorrow for reading the Bible together.
Have a great day.